Right, hello everyone, and welcome to all of those streaming in and those who are going to watch it afterwards. A very good afternoon and warm welcome to you all. It's so good to have you all here and here on the screens. To introduce myself, I'm Kesh Mahmood. I'm the e-commerce director, so I look after the website and our marketing out to our customers. And for those of you who don't know, Unity at Next is our employee-run network. I got involved in it about a year ago. And it's there to try and unite and celebrate and appreciate all of the cultural diversity we have at Next in our employees and in our customers. The main objective of Unity has been to champion a workplace which enables everyone to be their authentic and their best selves and to show up without fear, without prejudice, and to try and represent really our customer base with our colleagues across our business and to work with all of you across the business to try and make that happen. Now, diversity and inclusion isn't just a buzzword anymore. It is absolutely essential. It's how a business now has to sustain itself in this modern world. Reports from BITC and McKinsey suggest organizations with diverse teams have anywhere between 21 and 36% better financial returns than their industry peers. Yet in the UK, the employment rate for people with ethnic backgrounds is only 60%. So you can see the gap and the issue there. It's something we all need to be really proactive about. Earlier this year, I accepted Unity's invitation to work with the fantastic team we have to be their sponsor, and it's been absolutely exciting. It's been brilliant to be part of the team. If you want to know more about Unity, please go to unity.go.next. Okay, so why are we here today? How did this event come about? So as the team, the Unity team, we were looking at how we could really do something that was impactful, that made a big difference. And of course, we send out lots of newsletters and lots of emails, and I'm sure you all read them and wait for them with great enthusiasm. But we thought something that was going to capture your hearts a little bit more, something a bit more impactful. And the best idea we thought to do that was to bring in an inspirational guest speaker who can help come on and really motivate you all around this and create a disruptive moment with us. So we've brought this gentleman right here. Where's he gone? There he is. He's now become one of you, hiding in the crowd. And just to introduce him before he comes up and does his talk, how many of you have wondered what your life would be like if you had the courage to dream more, or perhaps felt like there were some blockers there that prevented you from living your best life? Well, this man's amazing story will certainly make you stop and take a moment. One of the Windrush generation, he grew up in very challenging circumstances, dirt poor, and as he describes in his words, severely dyslexic and a bit of a troublemaker. Despite all of that, he overcame the odds to have a successful career in television, producing cookery shows, bringing many celebrity chefs we know now into that realm. Hanging on to his childhood dream, he transitioned from that and bought a farm, and then went on to build the Black Farmer, which is an award-winning brand. It supplies lots of the major supermarkets and the catering industry, and has its own online shop as well. His life has been fraught with so many challenges, including battling leukemia, but he hasn't backed down. And one thing that struck me was his tenacity and his willingness to challenge the conventional order of things and really be authentic to who he is. And that's kind of what we're trying to get across today. So let's prepare for a disruptive moment. Please give a very warm welcome, the Black Farmer, Wilfred Emmanuel-Jones, MD.
Well, thank you very, very much, and it's nice to see so many people who've decided to come along and hear me speak. Now, I'm going to break my talk up into three sections. I'm going to first of all tell you a bit about my background. I'm then going to go on to tell you how I created the Black Farmer brand, and then give you some sort of ideas about what I think about the future. So, as it was said in the introduction that I am disruptive, so please excuse me if I use some cuss words, because that's the way that I could only describe some of my experiences. So if I go all the way back to the beginning, I was born in Jamaica, and I was born in a place called Frankfield, Clarendon. So you're nodding. Do you know Frankfield Clarendon? Well, Frankfield Clarendon is one of those, it's right in the middle of the island. In Jamaica, we would say that's bush. They'll call that bush, which means it's quite a rural part of the island. And you'll see quite a lot of subsistence farmers actually working the land. So I've always felt, in fact, that sort of farming is very, very much part of my DNA. But as you know, that people like my parents, when they came to this country, they basically went to where their work was, which happened to be in the big cities. But one of the things I think is really, really important and sometimes is forgotten is that it takes a lot of entrepreneurial courage to leave everything that you know behind you, your family and your friends, in order to go to another country to better your lives, not only your life, but the lives of your children. So those of us of color must remember that we are from people who are extremely courageous, because for everyone that came over, a lot of people thought, we ain't going to do that, we're going to stay put. So, as you know, the story is that people like my parents came to this country. I was left behind with my sister and to be looked after by relatives until they had enough money to then send for us. And in my case, we were brought up in Birmingham. Now, I've got to be really careful about this bit here. Is anybody here from Birmingham? But there's going to be people watching this who's from bloody Birmingham. So I apologize now to anybody that might hear this. But the part of Birmingham that I'm from is a place called Small Heath. And if anybody knows Small Heath, Small Heath is one of those classic inner city areas devoid of hope, devoid of opportunities. It's been some 40 years since I've been back. And so horrendous was that experience, I could still feel how awful it was. It was like living in a shithole. I can't think of any better way of sort of describing it. It was not a pleasant experience. And I want you to picture this. I'm from a family of 11. I've got 8 brothers and sisters, and we lived in one of those 2-up, 2-down terrace houses. So you can imagine how cramped it is. There were 3 to a bed, and we were very, very, very poor. And anybody from Birmingham watching this will know the Bullring Market, where my mother would actually go and do the shopping. And I can remember my mother trying to feed all 11 of us with one chicken. One chicken, and it ain't the sort of chickens you now get from Tesco's, the nice tender stuff. These were the old boiler chickens, the old hens that people would give away for next to nothing. And you had to cook them for bloody days in order to get them to be sort of tender. So I can remember my mum doing that. And even to this day, I have a real fetish for chicken bones, because I was there thumping away these bloody bones to try and get every bit of nutrition out of these sort of bones. Now, as a way of subsidizing the family income, my father had an allotment, and it was my responsibility as the oldest boy to look after this allotment. And this allotment really became my oasis away from the misery of where I was living. And this is where my story starts. And if you want to take anything from today, this is the bit you need to try and remember. I can remember at the age of 11 years old, I loved being on this allotment so much that I made myself a promise that one day I would like to own my own farm. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but it was a promise that I lodged into the back of my mind, and then everything that I subsequently did was to get into position to buy this farm. I'm going to tell you how I did it, but it's really, really important that people have the audacity to dream and dream big. If this was an American audience now, you'd be jumping up and going, yeah, because they understand and they grasp the concept that you could reach above your station, that to have big dreams is very, very, very important. Being British, we're far more reserved. We hold back the things that we feel. But what you will find in my story is that in order to achieve anything, you have to have the courage to dream it, to be bold, and to say it, to put it out there. Because if you don't say it and put it out there, you will not get the opportunities that's going to make those dreams come true. So I went to, I think they used to call them secondary moderns. I went to the local secondary modern school in Small Heath. And this secondary modern school was as much of a shithole as a place that I sort of lived in. The teachers hated being there. The kids hating being there. They didn't really educate us. They policed us because they didn't really think that we would achieve much in our lives. And to be frank, a lot of the kids that I went to school with ended up in prison. It wasn't a very nice experience. And to make it even worse, I am dyslexic. And in those days, and probably still today, people don't understand dyslexia. And so most of the time I spent at school not really knowing what was sort of going on. So at the age of 16, I left school without any qualifications at all. I could barely read and write. I wanted to get away from home because 3 to a bed is a bloody cramped experience. And it's like, well, what the hell can he do? And because I didn't have the intelligence to do anything else, the only thing I could do was to join the army. So I joined the army. Now you can imagine, in those days, if you're a black guy and you've got attitude, there's 1 or 2 things that's going to happen to you. You're either going to shut the fuck up and do as you're told, or they're going to kick the shit out of you to try and sort of discipline you. So they tried to do that with me, but after about a year, they gave up and I got kicked out of the army. So the only qualification that I have to my name is a dishonorable discharge from the army, okay? See, I'm 18 years old now, and you can imagine that everything that people would predict that would happen to people like me from my background, it looked as though I was heading in that sort of direction. And this is what's really interesting. In those days, if you were a failure at everything, they thought, well, what the hell could we do with them? And what they thought, well, chuck them into catering because, A, they could be a kitchen porter, they could wash the dishes, and they could learn the basics in catering. Catering is now a glamorous profession. In those days, it wasn't. It was just where failures went to. And so I went to the local catering college in Halesowen, and luckily, I enjoyed catering. I ended up working in various hotels, restaurants, nowhere glamorous, basically flipping burgers and things like that. So I was able to earn a living. And this is also another key point to my story. So as much as I was making a living, the promise that I'd made to myself at the age of 11, that promise was always there nagging at me, saying, boy, if you're going to buy a farm, you ain't going to be able to buy a farm flipping burgers. You're going to need to come up with some bigger, courageous ideas of what you could actually do. And at that time, there used to be a fantastic BBC documentary series on called 40 Minutes. They used to make social documentaries. I used to love this series. And I can remember saying to all of my family and friends, you know what? I'm going to go and get a job at the BBC making programs, TV programs as a producer-director. So you can imagine, everybody looked at me and just thought, this guy's nuts, because A, he could hardly read and write. Television, basically, it's what they call the Oxbridge types are the ones who tend to end up at the BBC. Now, I have lived my life with this philosophy, and it's actually served me really well. And the philosophy is this: any successful person you will ever meet in life, the reason why they are successful is because of 2 things. All you ever need to achieve anything you want in life is 2 things. It doesn't matter on your color, it doesn't matter on your background, it doesn't matter on your education, it doesn't matter on your gender. All you need is 2 things. The first thing is that you need to be ruthlessly focused. Absolutely focused. And what I mean by that is that you're able to get rid of the white noise that surrounds our lives. If most of you look at your lives, it's full of shite. It's full of things that really do not matter. What's really interesting is that the only time people realize that is when they're either on death's door or they're pretty ill. It's very easy then to see what actually really fundamentally matters and what doesn't. And that ability to be absolutely focused and clear everything out is really important. So focus is the first thing. The second thing, and this is way, way more important than the first thing, is that you have to have passion. And the reason why passion is important is because passion defies logic. It defies reason. It doesn't add up. It actually helps you get over all of the hurdles that will come your way. And people get very confused when I use this word passion. They think, well, what the hell do you mean? And I said, look, have you ever seen somebody when they're in love? Have you ever seen somebody when they're in love? They do fucking crazy things. They do, you stand back and think, this is nuts what this person's doing. You observe, they're so driven to do whatever. You're all laughing here because you've either been through that experience or you're doing that now. They are so driven, you stand back in amazement and in wonder. That is passion. So that demonstrates we all have that ability. It's about how then do we use those two things, focus and passion, in terms of the things that we personally want to achieve. So taking that word advice, and that came from my father, that advice, I decided, right, I want to get into the BBC, so I'm going to put everything into it. So I did all of the classic stuff. A lot of you people here are from human resources. I fucking hate human resources. And because what I did is that I wrote to every sort of producer, I wrote to every producer, director at the BBC. None of them would reply to me. I tried ringing them. None of them would take my calls. Nothing. Now, those people who know Birmingham, there used to be a big studio called Pebbermill in Birmingham, and they had massive security guards at the front of the building. And in those days, they had manual barriers that would let people in and out of the building. And the security guards hated getting out of their wooden sheds, especially during the cold weather, to let people in and out of the buildings. So I said to them, look, I'll do it, and I'll do it for you for nothing. So they thought, well, if this guy's crazy enough to do it, let him do it. So for months, I'm there opening this bloody barrier, letting people in and out of the building. Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, madam. Fucking let them in and out and all that. From there, I met the cleaners who were going in to clean the offices. And I said to them, look, can I help to help you clean the offices? And they said, yeah, and again, for nothing. And then this happened. This is really important. I remember, I met a guy, and his name was Jock Gallagher. This happened some 30 years ago, and I still remember his name. And he was a pretty senior person at the BBC. And I said to him, look, I'd love to get a job in television. And he told me to come into his office, and he spoke to me for about an hour. And he says, look, you're not the type of person that we employ in television because you don't have the education and you've got a bit of an attitude problem. And he said, but look, what I would do, and he said, this is something he said he might live to regret it, but he said, what I would do is this. I will give you a job as a runner for 3 months and then to see what happens. Now that man, having the courage to give me that break, then started off a long career in television. So one of the key things in life, I say to everybody, is to find your guardian angels. Find your guardian angels. Every single thing I've ever achieved, somebody has gone out of their way to give me a break. And you will not find those people unless you put it out there, unless you tell people this is what you want. It's really, really important. It's no good just sitting there expecting people to know what you want. Put it out there, and the right people will come to help you on your journey. So I started off as a runner. I then went on to be a researcher. I then went on to be a producer, director. And I traveled the world. I went to every single country you could think of, making programs about food and drink. And my boss at that time, another guardian angel, a guy called Peter Bazalgette, it was my job to break in all of these big-name celebrity chefs. And that program, was a program called the Food and Drink Program, was responsible for really creating the celebrity chef culture. And these chefs, they're hard bastards, basically. They don't take any shit from anybody. And they're the sort of people that would take you outside to sort a problem out. And my boss knew that I was the sort of person that would oblige, I could tell you some fantastic stories. I gave people like Gordon Ramsay his first break in television, James Martin, Raymond Blanc, you name them, it was my job to break them in, because I was saying to these guys earlier on, those were the days when we used to shoot film. Film was very, very expensive, and therefore it had to be controlled and directed and managed, not like video today. And because I was from the same side of the street of these chefs, basically, I didn't have any fear. So that became my job, breaking them in. So I'd been at the BBC for 15 years, and you would think, from my background, the wise thing to do is to shut the fuck up, be grateful, keep your head down, don't rock the boat, because, coming from society's shit heap to be working for somewhere like the BBC, that's where you should be grateful. The moment you do that in life, the moment you stand still, life will pass you by. Never, ever stand still. And the thing that stops you standing still is having the dream to follow. Because I could remember sitting there at the BBC thinking, well, it's a pretty glamorous life, but, there's no money in it. and that if you really want to actually buy your farm, you're going to have to leave the BBC and you're going to have to set up your own company. That's the only way you're going to be able to afford to buy land. And one of the reasons why that is that if you're an immigrant coming to this country, it's almost impossible to buy land because most farmers have their land handed down to the generations. And so buying land is a very expensive game. And so if you're new to this country, you just can't really get the money to buy the land. That's why it's so difficult. So I knew I'd have to start up my own business. And one of the things that's really interesting, and you'll all be able to sort of identify with this, is that you've all got dreams of things that you would love to do. All of you have got dreams of what you would like to do. And the one thing that stops you doing that is fear. Fear. And fear is based on, well, what if that doesn't happen? That everybody is looking for some form of certainty. And now I could tell you one thing, there's only one thing that is certain in this life, and that is life is uncertain. And so if you could adapt that thinking that don't look for certainty, it doesn't exist. The only thing you can come to terms with is life is uncertain. And therefore, how do you manage living in that type of environment? And I say, well, the way you manage it is that you put your arm around uncertainty, you walk forward, and you say, look, I don't know what I'm going to come across. I don't know. But whatever I come across, I will find a way. Far too many people think they need to actually know how to deal with what comes ahead before they step forward. If you do that, you'll never step forward. And the things that you'll meet along the way, you would never have figured it out. You just would have no way of knowing this is what's going to help you. So being worried or being fearful of what you think may be happening is total waste of sort of time. So the only difference between an entrepreneur and other people is that we don't let fear control what we do. So many people live in fear, and then fear then creates survival mode. Worst possible thing. If you want to know a bit more about it, I'm going to talk to you about my book in a moment called Jeopardy, The Danger of Playing It Safe. Fear stops people from doing the things that they want to do. So by having that dream to have my farm, I knew, boy, to honor that dream, I'm going to have to leave what could be perceived as the security of the BBC and set up my own company. So I decided I was going to set up a food and drink marketing agency because obviously my experience was working in food. I'd been a chef, so that seemed to be the natural thing to do. And I could remember leaving the BBC and just having enough money to pay my mortgage for 3 months. After 3 months, I would have no money at all left, had no clients. It's just the will of actually, this is what I want to do. And there's nothing that focuses the mind more than knowing you wouldn't got enough money to pay the mortgage for 3 months. You just get rid of the safety nets in life because you can't really achieve greatness unless you get rid of the safety nets. And again, what happens? By putting it out there, people come your way. People are fantastic. They will give you a break if you put it out there. And gradually, I started to get some clients. And we launched brands like Lloyd Gross & Sauces, Kettle Chips, Plymouth Gin, Cobra Beer. These are big brands now, but back in the day, they were small challenger brands that wanted to work with people that were hungry and wanted to really try and do something different. So I built that business, and I ran that business for about 15 years, and then that gave me the money to buy my farm. One of the things I like to do is to go and do this talk at schools. And one of the things I say to young people, I don't swear, but I say to them, look, dream fucking early because it takes a long time to achieve your dreams. Most people think that life is a sprint. It's not. It's a marathon. And if you could sort of grasp that idea that if you just keep going, things will come good. Now, I used to go down to Devon and Cornwall for my holidays a lot. And I remember buying my farm. It's just outside a place called Launceston, or Lanston, as they say, down there. And it's on the border of Devon and Cornwall. And I can remember saying to my family and friends in up country, as we say in London, that I'm going to buy this farm. And they go, whoa, don't they lynch black people down there? Because there are no black people down there at all. It's just like, it's like going into an alien territory. It's just really bizarre. And then all the white farmers, white locals, they just couldn't understand Why is a black guy from London wanting to come and live here and buy a farm? It just didn't make sense to them. And here's a funny story, actually, and this is a true story. I can remember when I put up my first polytunnel to grow vegetables, and somebody called the police out. And they called the police out because they thought I was using it as a cover to grow weed, ganja. So it just goes to show that when you're trying to do something different and you're trying to break the stereotype, it's really, really confusing. What I've always believed is this: it's outsiders who bring change. It's outsiders who see opportunity. Because what I saw when I bought my farm was there's a massive gulf between urban and rural Britain. It's as though you're in two different countries. And with that, I saw an opportunity. I said, I want to create a brand that's going to try and bridge that gap between urban and rural and do something pretty remarkable and pretty different. And I thought, right, I wanted to do something that was going to be very, very mainstream, because if you're black and you're trying to develop something, people would tend to think, oh, that's for the ethnic market. They're confused about you could be black and also sort of mainstream. So I said, right, I'm going to create a brand that is targeted at the mainstream. And I thought, well, what it is, that's very, very mainstream. And because I'm in food, it's obviously going to be a food product. And I thought, oh, you know what it is? I'll do a sausage. Oh, the British people love their sausages, so I'm going to do a sausage, which is quintessentially British. And then I wanted to find a small gap, and the research said there's that 1 in 100 people have some sort of wheat intolerance. So I thought, right, I'm going to do a gluten-free sausage. And then again, what I found is that I found a manufacturer, a guy who thought, this black guy is crazy enough, let me give him a break. So him and I worked together in terms of developing this sausage. So I got a sausage, and then the next thing was to come up with a brand name. Now, people spend thousands upon thousands trying to come up with the right brand name. And I was scratching my head for months thinking, what the hell am I going to call this brand? And one day it came to me. All of my next door neighbors used to call me the Black Farmer. And I thought, shit, that's a pretty good brand name. Not only is it a really good brand name, but no one else out there can nick the idea because there's no black farmers. And it has an edge. We live in a society where people are really confused about what is the correct language to use when you're referring to people of color, especially down in rural Britain. They still today refer to you as colored rather than black because they think colored is more polite than black. There's still a lot of confusion about what is the right sort of language to use. Now, as you could tell from this talk, I'm quite bold, but even I just thought, well, actually, Wilfred, you probably better go and check this out before you go and decide to call your brand the Black Farmer. So I went and did all the classic research that everybody does when they're researching something. And this is a lesson for everybody here who lives and die and make all their decisions based on research, evidence, and data. The research came back and says, do not call it the Black Farmer. Because people will be offended, people will be upset, it's going to cause a bit of a sort of shitstorm. And it did to a certain extent. And there's a lesson here. And it's really important, this lesson. And the lesson is this. Research would tell you what people were thinking yesterday. Research can tell you what people are thinking today. But research cannot tell you what people are thinking tomorrow. That is where you need to have the courage of your vision. Any great innovation, any greatness doesn't come from research and evidence. It comes from a crazy dream, somebody having a dream of something that they want to do. And so, as you could tell, I decided to call it the Black Farmer. And when I did, a couple of people complained about it. Let me give you a story. I can remember, as well as sausages, we did bacon. And you know when you buy shitty bacon and you got that white streaks that come out of it, pretty horrible. One of the things we developed was a bacon that it didn't have any white bits that are coming out of it. So we put on our branding, the Black Farmer bacon, no white bits. And and somebody complained to the racial equality, saying that I was being racist towards white people. So that goes to see the total confusion, because it's so different to what people see, they just were confused by it. Anyhow, I then went to all of the supermarkets to try and get them to list these products. And everything that you've heard about supermarkets is correct. They're bastards. They're really tough negotiators. And what I understood is that, you don't really have much power when you're a supplier. The only people that big retailers like Next and I don't know that care about is their customers. They really, really care about their customers. And so the key thing as a supplier is to understand their customers and how do you get their customers on side. Now, I launched my business about 18 years ago, and it was just at the start of the social media revolution that Facebook had just started. All of the things we take for granted now did not exist. Now, if you wanted to get your message out there before the social media revolution, the only way you could do it was through these gatekeepers, and these gatekeepers would be TV, magazines, newspapers. That's the only way you could get to you people, which were vitally important. What social media did, it allowed you to get to the consumers to get across your message. So what I decided to do when all the supermarkets said no, said, right, I'm going to go around the country and do a massive roadshow at all these big food shows and do massive sampling exercise. And at the same time, I put all the names of all the buyers, and supermarket buyers, their names, their telephone numbers, their address on my website. And when people liked the products, I'd say, look, if you really like the products, supermarkets ain't going to listen to me. Can you go and email and write to the buyer and say, why aren't you listing these products? And as God is my witness, that's how I got my listing. If you get the consumer on your side, they become your sales force. As a business, we are fanatical about how we look after our customers, because I know we are in existence because these people went out batting for us. And one of the things I say to people is that, well, why are people so crazy about us? And, it's like, well, we're not necessarily the best sausages in the world. We could say we are. They're not buying us because we're the best. They're not buying us because we are the cheapest. There is something else about this brand that actually people want to identify with. We are a purpose-driven brand that's trying to bring about change. So the key thing in your life and as a business is, what is your purpose? And if you understand that, you'll then know why people are buying into you. So we started off with sausages. We've gone into bacon, chicken. We do a lot of food products in the supermarket. And as we said in the intro, we now do sort of online business. Now, the reason I like telling my story is because you can look at me now and you can think, well, Jesus Christ, everything about me looks privileged, posh, but actually I'm from a society's dustbin heap that through tenacity, I've managed to get this far. And being black, it's even more of a challenge because you're having to break down stereotypes all the time. All of the time. Here's another funny story. It just goes to show how life is. Just a few weeks ago, in fact, as you can imagine, I've got a lovely, nice, posh flat in London. It's got a nice, posh car, and I'm sitting out there at the front of my building. And then suddenly, some woman get in the back of my car saying, "Chelsea, please." She thought I was the taxi driver. Many times I will go into headquarters of a building and people will say, "Who are you here to pick up?" And so this is the sort of stuff that happens when you're a person of color. You're still actually having to fight against the stereotypical images that people have of you. Many times people, they expect you to be a football player, a musician, but they don't expect you to be the other things. So like a black farmer is a real big head scratcher. Most people, it's quite sort of confusing. So getting together like this and having these conversations gives a greater understanding of why diversity is so important, so we could all live in a better society. I just want to tell you another story, which is really, really important in terms of actually understanding how it's really important to have sort of focus and direction in your life. So up until about 8 years ago, I'm very successful, doing fantastically well, and very privileged to be in the position that I was in. And then I got ill. I got acute myeloid leukemia. And there's one thing you do not want to get in your life is acute myeloid leukemia, because it's a death sentence. Most people don't survive it, and the only possibility of surviving it is a stem cell transplant. And the older you are, the more unlikely you are to survive it. And I was just around 57, so it's pretty borderline. So they've had a lot of discussions about actually, shall we just send him home with some pills and say, look, prepare to die? Or shall we do a stem cell transplant? And to get a stem cell transplant, you've got to find a donor. So they thought, actually, he's got 8 brothers and sisters, so he'd probably get a donor from one of them. Anyhow, they looked at all of my brothers and sisters, and not one of them was a match. They then have a worldwide register where they go and look to find a match. They couldn't find a match. So if you're black, if you're Asian, if you're mixed race, they need people on that register because you could be saving lives. Because one of the big challenges they have is they don't have enough people from diverse backgrounds going on that register. So spread the word out there. In my case, I was pretty lucky. They couldn't find a match, but the hospital that I was in happened to be one of the most eminent hospitals around the world for this particular type of cancer. People flew in from the Middle East, all the place for such treatment. And they did something called, what they call a haplo transplant. And I was in hospital for a whole year trying to survive this sort of stuff. As you could tell, I survived it. Now, there's a consequence of surviving it, which is something they call graft versus host disease. So if you look at my skin and my fingernails, you see that there's vitiligo. Now, this vitiligo was caused by this stem cell transplant. Now, I see that as a gift. And the reason why I see that as a gift is that every day I look in the mirror, I know that, boy, you are lucky to be here. 2 years earlier, the science would not have been around and I'd be dead. So it helps to really focus your mind on what is important. And then also, what it reminds me of as well is that how can I share my story? How can I inspire people to help them on their journey in life? Because by doing that, that for me is how you could help people fulfill the things that they want in their lives. So we know we've only got this one life. Try and hold on to the dreams that you have. Try to make sure that you do not end up living in survival mode, because there's nothing worse for the human spirit than to be surviving, and to try and honor your dreams. Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you.
That was absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much, Wilfred. So we've got a few questions.
Yeah.
Some of which I've made up and some of which have been sent to me.
But I think
the ones sent to me aren't as good as the ones I've made up. Go on.
No, so if anybody there wants me to ask any questions, feel free, because that's always the most interesting part of the discussions. Anything you want to ask. I'm very happy to answer anything.
Well, let's start with your transition. You talked about your family coming over from Jamaica at that time. Would have been a hard time. Tell us a little bit more about that and how you found the transition into the United Kingdom.
I mean, if you imagine this, I came to this country when I was 4 years old, and I can remember seeing snow for the first time. It was really, really confusing. So not only seeing snow for the first time, but also being so bloody cold. And one of the things that's really interesting is that if you come from a country where you are the majority, that all you see is color around you, to then come to a country where you're the minority. Not only are the minority, but back then you're treated like shite. It really does impact your sort of personality, where you suddenly realize, God, you are seen to be in society's dustbin heap, really. And that I then look at my parents, the sort of stuff that they had to go through. And you could understand why people then really, really struggle in terms of being brought up in that sort of environment in the country as it was then, where if you were a person of color, you were seen to be on society's dustbin heap. You weren't really desired. It was a real struggle. And I sensed that quite a lot when I was growing up. And then you add all those difficulties, like the things that measure success, like having a good education, all the basics, you didn't have them. So you could understand that for people like me, you either end up feeling a failure and therefore in prison, or my saving grace was having that dream and also embracing being an outsider. I've always known the power of being the outsider. And I think a lot of people spend their lives trying to belong. And I write about it in my book, is that people have to make a decision, and this would be quite an interesting exercise for all of you actually, decide whether you want to be, to belong or to be. Now, when you belong to something, you have to follow the rules of the club, the rules of the community. It's a bit like, you're expected to follow the rules. To be, you go by your own rules. And then when you step out of belonging, everybody wants you to fail. They don't want you to succeed because actually, it doesn't look good on them if you succeed. So in any change in your life, whether that's a divorce, whether it's a breakup in a relationship, any change, you have to accept the fact that you'll be alone for a period of time, and you can't make those decisions based on how other people might feel. So it's about how to feel comfortable being an outsider. Hopefully that answers it.
It does. You mentioned when you were at school you got into a lot of trouble. People are interested. I can hear people's minds are interested in what kind of trouble you caused, what kind of trouble you were in at school. You have to now share some of that with us.
In those days, they were allowed to cane you, actually. And so I would always end up, Mr. Oldham, I still remember his name. Mr. Oldham, I was always in Mr. Oldham's office being caned. And then the worst punishment I ever had when I was at school was that he obviously decided that caning wasn't going to be effective. So he got me every day. I'd go to school and I had to stand outside of his office from 9 o'clock until 4 o'clock for 2 weeks. That nearly did my head in. It was absolutely torture just standing outside his office. And but you see, I think it's a bit like everything. All of these sort of experiences that we have in life, in a sense, they're training you for what you need to go through, because in order to achieve your dreams, you've got to go through the pain of the struggle. And so when I look back at all of my life, and it seems pretty dramatic, but it was real great training, because to run your own business, at least I know, well, if you're on society's shit heap, there's only one direction to go, and that's up. So it toughens you for the journey ahead. And at the time, it wasn't a very good experience, but all of that helped to make me rounded as a person, and also to understand who I was. So it was very, very evident earlier on that I wasn't, I couldn't pass exams, I couldn't do things. I would have to find my own way. And so everything that I am is self-created. And people say to me, you're from Birmingham and you don't have a Brummie accent. Well, that's because I figured out pretty early on, if you want to succeed, Wilfred, there's a lot that you're going to have to change about yourself in order to get to the areas that you want to go to. So that's part of what's important as you're conditioning to yourself to achieve the things that you want.
Yeah, brilliant. You talked about dyslexia and how that affected you during school. Yeah. Since then, and as you've gotten older and you've created your business, do you still find that dyslexia is a barrier? Do you still find that you've been able to find your way through it? Or have you struggled with it ongoing?
Dyslexia is a gift. I feel that it's a fantastic gift that you have. And most of the successful people that you will see, they're dyslexic. And the reason, it's only now, when I was younger, the one thing, if I look back and I regret, is that I spent so much time being ashamed of being dyslexic. I can remember when I was at the BBC, for example, and I hid the fact that I was dyslexic. And that, when people would get me to write scripts, and I would be spending hours and hours and days and all of that thing, feeling ashamed of not being able to operate as fast as everybody else. And so if I look back and I think of all those wasted years of being embarrassed, being ashamed of that, it's only now I just thought, God, if I had the courage to admit it and see that what I had was a gift. So one of the reasons why I was a very, very good director. I would be very good at getting things done. I was visually pretty strong. And it's only in later years that I was able to acknowledge that actually dyslexia was a gift, because it means you're able to think outside the box, is that you're able to come up with solutions because you're not limited by people who've learned things, and so therefore their order of coming to decisions is very, very, very structured based on the educational system, whereas dyslexic have to think outside the box. So I spend a lot of time trying to encourage people who are dyslexic, any form of learning difficulties, and not to see it as a as a burden, but as a gift, and how to use that gift to their benefit.
Brilliant. Okay. Talking about farming, so obviously you were maybe the first black farmer that we've maybe had in the United Kingdom. Do you find you've changed the status quo? Do you find things have moved on now and it's become much more acceptable, much more open? Do you find the industry's changed?
Well, it hasn't. The truth is that, and this is an example of how you could use a disadvantage into your advantage. And that's what I've always looked for. I've used, how can I use my blackness as an advantage rather than seen as a victim as a disadvantage. So I can remember at the time calling the brand the Black Farmer. A lot of black businesses felt, oh God, you can't be that overt because you're going to be, people are not going to buy from you. People, your color, people seen as a barrier. But, you've got to, in a sense, be brave enough to say, well, I'm going to change the way that people think. And when you've got money doesn't see color. So, going down to my farm in Devon, I got treated well because, if you're given employment and you got money, everybody creeps up to you. I mean, if I was black and looking for employment and things like that, it would have been a different experience. So what I want to do, so it's a bit like privilege, is what do you do with privilege? I don't have anything against privilege. What I say is, what do I do with my privilege? And what I want to do is to bring about change. How can we get more black people within rural Britain? And there's a number of things that I'm doing at the moment. I'm a governor of Cirencester Agricultural University. Now, most of you won't know what that is, but it's like the Oxbridge of all the agricultural colleges in the country. All the posh people send their kids, or the landowners send their kids to that university. And I particularly wanted to be a governor there because I want to bring about change there. It's unacceptable in this day and age that we don't have people from diverse backgrounds going into rural Britain. And those people don't even think about it. So being a governor there has helped me to bring about a change. I've also just launched something called the New Face of Farming, and I've done this with Whittle Agricultural College, and this is to get 16 to 18-year-olds from a non-traditional farming background to get a taster of what it's like to work and live in rural Britain. It's happening in March, and I'm advertising it now, so if you know anybody who's aged between 16 and 18 that wants a taster at Whittle College, that's one of my schemes. It won't cost them a penny. It's just to go there, because what I want is to get more people from diverse backgrounds into farming, food and farming in the rural community. What I say to people of color is this: our parents were really, really courageous in coming here in the first place. They went through hell. And in a sense, what we, the second and third generation, mustn't do is just stay in what I call the urban enclaves. It is our job, our responsibility to branch out and to feel comfortable and claim the rest of Britain as our own. One of the things that I love is that on my farm, I know that this is my piece of England. I own, this land is my piece of England. And you don't really feel as though you belong somewhere until you own land. Land is where the power is. So we will no longer be in transit if we have more black people having the courage to go out and getting land. And there's some changes that I'm trying to bring about, because I said earlier on how difficult it is to buy land. But there are a lot of institutions that own land. The National Trust own land. The Church of England owns a lot of land. Any big institution you will know owns a lot of land. And what these people do is that they lease their lands out to the traditional families. And I'm trying to get a ruling where these institutions, let's just say, give 5% of their land over to new entrants to farming. So new people with new ideas, because some of the interesting things about farming at the moment is that a lot of the foods that get imported into this country that's consumed by people from diverse backgrounds can be grown in this country. So there's billions and billions of pounds that could be grown in this country, but the traditional farmers have no interest. So we need people from diverse background that could see the opportunity to grow things. It'd be fantastic for the economy, because the technology now means that, like tomatoes is a fantastic example. 20 years ago, most of the tomatoes that we had in this country was imported. Most of it now is grown in this country because the technology is there. So when you start thinking about all of these ethnic foods that could be grown in this country, that's the sort of stuff that I would like to start seeing happening.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
You talked about guardian angels in your life. I thought that was brilliant to hear about guardian angels, and also about how outsiders bring change in. I thought those two are really good statements. Next is a very multicultural business. I don't think we have a problem with diversity or anything like that. But we do know there's unconscious bias. People don't sometimes realize the bias that they might have in their mind. What would you say to people that are hiring people from outside in Next? How do they get past that unconscious bias and try to look towards bringing change from outside?
Okay. Everybody has unconscious bias. Now, you shouldn't feel guilty about having unconscious bias. I do, and I'll give you an example about that. I can remember one of my employers saying to me, you know what, Wilfred, I think that the only reason why I got this job is because you were on holiday on the day of the interview. And she's right. I said to her, everything about her would have irritated the hell out of me, And what would have irritated me, because her personality type, which is that she's more considered, she's more thorough, whereas I'm more sort of fucking it. and that girl has been working for me for 25 years, and she's the most important person in the business because she looks after the finances. So there's a lesson there. Be careful of your own prejudices. Yeah. We all have prejudices, so we could learn by where our biases are, and then we then make allowances for it. So all too often, people get really upset at the fact that, it's being pointed out to them. But I know that I do, and therefore what I'm prepared to do is put things into place. So I then do not have a company that is not going to benefit because of my sort of prejudices. So I think it's really, really important that we keep challenging ourselves so we discover what are our biases. And a bias doesn't make you racist. It doesn't make you a bad person. It's all about how it helps us to learn about ourselves. So the more we do that, we should be praising ourselves because we're challenging ourselves to the way that we think. So the more courses that they do, the more that you sort of grow as a person. So I advocate those things all the time rather than people being upset about it.
Brilliant. Last one for me, and then we can maybe get a mic out to the crowd.
Oh, guardian angels, you said as well. Well,
yeah.
I can't really emphasize enough how important guardian angels are, because, again, if you think about, I said as a joke how much I sort of, hate human resources. Because human resources filters people out, and that actually,
we have some lovely human resources people.
You do. You get all these applications, chuck them out and things like that. It doesn't deal with random. And therefore, if you are going to truly get something entrepreneurial and different, it is random, and it's someone putting their name to it, and that only comes from a senior person. One of the things I like to say to senior execs in any business is this: one of the greatest things you could do is once a year, get somebody from your local diverse community and give them 2 weeks work experience, and 2 weeks work experience following you. Because it will do two things. It will make that person feel brilliant in terms of actually what is possible. They're able then to go back and tell their community about it, because it's like a powerful sort of experience for them. And also it sends a message to the rest of the business that this is the sort of stuff that's worth doing. It's easier to send things to human resources, or that they'll sort it out. But the thing for us in life is about what is it that we could personally do to make a difference. And that's what I think about. There are things and organizations, but this is the sort of stuff that I could personally do. To that end, I run something called the Hatchery. And the reason I created the Hatchery is because a lot of people come to me because of obviously my status with ideas, or business ideas that they have. And if I like them, what I will do is that they could come then and work for me at the Black Farmer, and we will then develop their business at the same time. And I've got some pretty good successes. I've got a black guy, came to me with an idea for beef jerky, this sort of high protein stuff. And I said, right, let's create a brand which is all about high protein. And this brand now is a £6 million brand. It's in Sainsbury's, it's in Tesco's. It's really, really good. I have another brand called Smorgasbord, and that's about sort of meatballs. And this guy was in his 60s. He originally came to me for a job, and I said, no, I won't give you a job, but we developed this brand together. And I've just launched another brand called I'm Halal, and that's targeting the sort of the Muslim community. So that's part of me sort of giving back, remembering the fact that I'm here because people basically took a chance with me. So that's why I think if I could be other people's guardian angels, that is far more of a fulfilling life. And being a guardian angel doesn't mean you have to do much. In my case, it's somebody just showing faith in you. The thing about life is that you don't do it for people. It's about giving the opportunity. And sometimes when you give opportunities, people will fail the opportunity. That ain't your responsibility. All you're responsible for is giving the opportunity. It's up to them what they then do with that opportunity.
It's brilliant. So turning that around then, we've also got a lot of younger people joining Next. In my department, we've got lots of people straight out of university joining us. What would you say to the younger people joining Next on the reverse of that and how to grasp that opportunity and make the most of it?
Well, yeah, I think for any young people, I say this. I'm 65, and it's only when you get to this age, you just think, my God, I've wasted so much time being fearful. But it's when you're young, when you're very, very young, that is when you take all the chances. Now, the greatest measurement about whether you are living your life to full is pretty simple. And I say to people, the way to see whether you're living in survival mode or whether you're living is to ask yourself, when was the last time you made a mistake? When was the last time you really fucked up? Because the only way of measuring that you're living life to the full is by the number of mistakes that you make. If you can't point to mistakes, you're slumming it. You're cruising in life. Because it's the mistakes that are your great teachers. It's what drives you forward as a sort of human being. So it's very easy. So if you sit down comfortably and think, well, I haven't made a mistake, you shouldn't be proud of that. It means you're not trying hard enough. Yeah. You're pushing all the time, and you're constantly sort of learning, especially when you're young. Especially when you're young. Do not get into that sort of survival mode of not getting it wrong, because you're not developing, you're not learning. In our company, the mantra is don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness. Because actually, you're pushing all the time. Don't be too cautious.
Brilliant, fantastic. Should we get a couple of questions in then from the audience? Who wants to go first? No?
Well done.
Rene?
You're
Yeah.
courageous, is it? I didn't want to delve. Thank you very much. Yeah.
When you first started the talk, you mentioned audacity to dream. And I just wondered why you used that word audacity. I have my own thoughts, but I just wondered why you used the word audacity to dream.
Because the reason I use the word audacity is that the whole system we have in terms of from kids now is how to, and the language that people use is how to bring people down. Or that person is trying to get trying to be above their station. Anytime people want to be bold, everything is there to try and keep you in your place. And so therefore, to break out of that is audacious, because everybody's going to be looking around and thinking, are you fucking nuts? Or who do you think you are? You just get a lot of negativity. And so, most things in life is down to a mindset. And the mindset is that, I know you all think it's crazy. I know that it doesn't sort of make sense. That is why I use the word audacity. Because you can't rationalize. If you try and rationalize and work out whether it makes sense or not, you'll never do it. Because it won't make sense. It is crazy. And so to use what I call management language to justify doing it is a mistake. When you're trying to do something new. Now, what's really interesting about a big corporate structure like this is that, you've been around for a number of years, and then you need to have structures, you need to have systems, you need to have protocols. But one of the things from my favorite person, Steve Jobs, says the key thing in life and the key thing in business is to stay hungry. Always stay hungry. Always feel that it isn't all there. And if you have that sort of mentality, you'll be fine. You know, there's a lot about me, still that kid out of the ghetto trying to break out. Stay hungry. That then keeps the fight in with you.
Yeah, and I think it's trying to, even though we're in 2022, I grew up in the 70s and 80s in Kesha, and I was talking about it yesterday, and I faced a lot of challenges
Yeah.
at school.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I still feel like I was first generation born here, but I still feel like second, third generation here. They still don't have that fighting spirit because I still feel like they don't feel that they should fight for that position. And even though Cash is very much, wanting to promote how managers recruit, how they think about recruiting, I still feel like, like in our department, Cash said earlier, we've got a lot of young people that have come in junior roles. But it's how do we instill that fighting spirit in people from diverse communities to say, yeah, go for the role. You're not going to get pushback. Go for that role. It doesn't matter if your mum and dad want to be a doctor or engineer. Just keep, go. How do we push
Do that? You see, what I think is this, and it may be looking at the people that you're recruiting, because some people think they've gone to university and therefore they leave university and they could get a job by right. You'd be amazed how many people I've got to kick that out of them the moment they actually leave university, is that the real world starts here. Yeah. And I think it's about how do you find those people who want to prove something? Because I think they exist. It's about how do we find them in the recruiting process. And I think, and this will be good for you guys in human resources, most people employ people based on their experience and their qualifications. I never employ anybody based on their experience and qualification. I employ people on the basis of their attitude, because you could teach people, you could give them the experience, and it's about how do you find attitude. And attitude is people who they've got something to prove. And I think all too often our systems are geared to, qualifications and, ticking all these boxes, but not attitude, because attitude is something in the gut. That is the thing that means you get people who are really, really good. That's what I look for when I'm employing people. Where is the attitude? I think that lady there. Yeah.
My question is, looking back on now that you're successfully achieved goals, what's the biggest thing that you've learned along the way? What would you go back and do differently?
What would I go back and do differently? Well, I mean, as I was saying in my talk, the big regret is spending so much time being ashamed of being dyslexic. And then when you're starting off in business, you're not sure, because you don't have any anchors to tell you whether you're doing the right thing. So you've only got sort of self-belief that it's going to be right. And then you can't achieve anything unless you have people around you. And it's about understanding what's your strengths and what's your weaknesses. Now, I think you need two types of people to run a business. You need a gentleman and a thug, okay? People don't like working for thugs. They like working for a gentleman, because gentlemen make them feel good and make them feel that, they could do things. But you need a thug in the background to say, this is what we're going to do, regardless. And that balance with any business structure is really, really important. And then the other thing that I'm pretty fanatical about it, really, as a business, is that a lot of businesses can become about the employees and they forget who the bloody customer is, that the customer is second and their interest is first. And I just think that how do you drum into, so in my business, for example, everybody has to do customer service. Doesn't matter your seniority, doesn't matter what you do, you've got to do your stint every week on customer service. And the reason why that is, it's a reminder of who's paying your wages and to keep you in touch with who the real people are. So you don't allow your sort of culture to be more important. And that, for me, is a great challenge in running a business where everybody wants to work to their standard, whereas I want people to work to my standard, and it's actually about the customer is more important. I'm not interested in your life until I've sorted out those customers, and then we become second. So I've answered a totally another question, but hopefully, hopefully that gives you an idea of what I'm saying, really. So what I've just learned is that the most important thing about any business is people. But people are the most fucking irritating thing there is. It's about how do you get that balance right between actually finding good people, which makes a good business, and getting that balance right. And it can be still a bit of a struggle, really.
Brilliant. Unfortunately, I think we're now short of time. We out of time?
Anybody else?
We're over. What we're going to do is... Oh, go on. We're going. One more.
No, that's it. Well, I didn't say. I was so shocked by it. I was so shocked by it. But I've been able to tell that story ever since, and it was also a great reminder. You might think you're the bee's knees, Wilfred, but people still just see a colour. And I just think that, and I don't think she was being racist. A lot of people might look at that and think she was being racist. That's an indication that we still live in a society where people see colour and then they assume things. That's the lesson that it is. And I think the thing about people use racism for so many things, where people are not racist, they make assumptions. And that's why things like Black History Month are quite important. So we could start getting these messages out there so people start changing their assumptions. So the more we do this sort of stuff, hopefully it makes a change. But she's just given me a very nice line to say at talks like this, basically.
Very good. Well, look, Wilfred's going to stay for a little bit and mingle. So although the formal questions are sort of finished, but we've got some cupcakes and drinks, and I think Wilfred's going to stay with us for a while and mingle.
That's right. Yeah, I think we've got some selling some of our products in your canteen.
In the canteen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just before we end this, maybe for 30 seconds, just tell us a little bit about your book and where your business is up to right now. Yeah.
Okay, so this Jeopardy, this is what they do when they're on the Graham Norton show. Jeopardy, danger. And Jeopardy is one of my favorite words, really, because when I used to work at the BBC, and you're going to do a story and you're going to do a program, the words they would always say is, well, where is the jeopardy in the story? And that, if you think about it, most of our lives, especially on television, it's all about jeopardy. And what jeopardy does, it presses the fear button. If you put on the news, if you're watching a drama, it's all about actually, they make money out of constantly pressing the fear button with you. And that's all it is. It's about, oh my God, the cost of living crisis. Oh my God, everything is geared to make people frightened. So if you just think about that for a moment, and the amount of money and the amount of industry by pressing that one thing in the human brain, fear, 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 if you realize that that's just a construct, and if you get over that, you could then start achieving the things that you want to achieve. Because pressing that fear button every single day makes you live in survival mode. And survival mode means, well, I've got to pay the mortgage, I've got to do this. It takes away choice. It takes away, audacity. It takes away the thought, it tries to hold people down. So there's so many things out there they're designed to make people fearful. What it's doing is that it's crushing your dreams. And so what I've done in this sort of book is to say, look, look at your lives and look at what survival mode is like, and that you don't want to end up going into hospital like me to realize that actually how you end up very easily living in survival mode. And it's quite, when you're fighting for life, you're very courageous then, the thoughts and the things. It's quite interesting when you get past the idea that you might die, there's a calm, especially when you start to survive, because what's really interesting is that I've been more successful since I had my leukemia than before, because it takes away additional layers of fear. Because, when you're being on death's door, you can't be really frightened of many other things, basically. So, that's why I'm raw. I say that it is. I'm not concerned about sort of consequences. So that in itself is a fantastic sort of gift. So what I hope in this book, Jeopardy, the danger of playing it safe, because again, this thing, it's really interesting in our political situation at the moment. It's a bit, let's sort of play it safe. But eventually, we are going to have to grow. We are going to have to branch out and try and do things new. Otherwise, we just stand still and we grow old, disappointed and despondent because we haven't had the courage to break out of it. And just remember, it's really, really important, this is that fear is not real. It's stories that we tell ourselves. And we're really good telling ourselves stories of all the possibilities that could happen. And all the stories we tell ourselves of possibilities that could happen never do. But we'll see a drama about it. We'll see in news that's what it possibly could, and that is what holds people back from achieving their dreams. So if you want to find out more about it, it's in this book here.
Great. Ladies and gentlemen, the Black Farmer, Wilfred.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.